Spooling and tuning your baitcast reel correctly is one of the best ways to get the most out of your tools while on the water. So in today's video, let's cover that. Now, the way that you would spool both a braided line and a mono or fluoro line is going to be the same way. However, with braided line, you want to wrap one layer of electrical tape around the bottom of your spool, and this allows that braid to not slip on the bottom of your spool. It gives your braid something to kind of dig in and hold on to, and I'll show you guys in today's video how I put that electrical tape on my reel. Now, to put the electrical tape on the spool of your reel, if you guys don't need to do this, if you're using a mono or a fluorocarbon, on the top here, I will put the marker to which you can skip past this and just start spooling your setup. But if you are wanting to put electrical tape on using braid, most reels, it's very easy to get your spool off of your reel, and I've noticed that is the easiest way to get this done. So on this reel right here, the Shimano, there's actually, you switch it to the very end and there's an open button. And then we have an open key right here. Most reels on your outside spool knob right here, you will have your button to be able to open your reel up. Mine goes out like this because it's a DC reel. However, some of your other Shimanos will actually, or your other reels will just kind of, this will flip open right here, and then it kind of folds over to the side like that. So this one comes off, and then at this point, you can take your spool out of your reel. Now, this is the easiest way, I think, to get that electrical tape on your reel. All you do is you're gonna take a little piece here of our tape. You don't need a lot, just one layer around the spool. We're gonna grab our scissors here, cut that off. Okay, sometimes the tape, like for instance, this tape is, I don't have to cut it because it's not as wide as the spool, but sometimes you may have to cut that tape in half because you don't want it folding up onto the sides of the spool here. But I'm just gonna put this down on the spool just like that, and I'm going to wrap it right around the base of that spool, just like that. If you guys see, I've got a perfect layer of tape right around, and then at this point, you can put your reel back in, close her up, and now you have your electrical tape on there. You are ready to go. Okay, so for this next step here, we have to actually attach the line onto our reel. Now, everyone has a different way they like to do it. Some people like to actually take the line, take the spool off, wrap it around the spool, and then bring it back through. I prefer to keep it on the reel just like this. I will bring my line here from my spool on, and I will kind of finagle this below my reel, and this really helps to have a pair of forceps here. I will kind of bring it underneath the reel and push that line. If you notice, the line went through on the bottom, right? So now I can grab my forceps on this other side here. I can grab the line from the bottom of the spool, or you can take it right here and kind of feed it back up through that hole, making sure that it is still around the spool. The main thing is you just want this all the way back around the spool. Now, some people will also grab it right here and you'll just tie your knot. However, the easier way, in my opinion, shout out to Justin Rackley from Lake Fork Guy. I watched a video a while back, and once I saw him do it this way, I will never do it, I will never do it another way again, right? You take your line, you put it back through your guide. So you now have a line wrapped around the inside spool of the reel, but you're in and out, coming out of that top little line roller right there. At this point, you just want to tie a uni knot. A uni knot is very simple. All you do, so if I'm looking at it from my direction here now, okay, you want to have a decent amount of tag line out. You loop this line around like that. So you just basically, your line in, you take your line going that you took out, this is your tag end, right? You loop just like this, and then using that loop, wrap this line around, and we're gonna wrap this probably 4 to 5 times. This is 10-pound test, so we probably wanna have a decently strong knot right here. Some people don't like having a strong knot to their spool, and that is 100% fair. I usually do that on my saltwater setups because, if a fish is spooling me and I have 65-pound braid, I don't want them yanking the setup out of my hands. I'd rather just lose the line. At this point, we've got our wraps here, and you're actually going to tighten this up a decent ways, not all the way, but just right there to the end. Okay, so if you guys see, we've got our knot and our line coming from the reel, and what's so cool about this is once you have this tightened down a decent bit here, if you pull on your main line, you see it actually forming, it'll actually tighten itself, and it'll go right back through that eye and connect onto the spool, and you're done. So now you're not having to worry about all this stuff. You tie the knot out here, you can give yourself as much tag as you want, and then you just pull it tight, and it's done. It's extremely simple. At this point, now all we have to do is we have to just cut that tag end off. So we will take our tag right here. We will cut that off pretty tight to the spool, and if you guys notice, we now have a super strong knot that actually gets stronger the tighter you pull it, which is cool, and we are ready to start spooling up our reel. Okay, now spooling the reel, in my opinion, is actually the easiest part of all of this. However, there is a couple things on here that are very important that if you mess up, it could really screw up your cast. And the first thing on this is you want the line on this spool to be rolling off the same way it is rolling on this reel, right? So the spool's unlike a spinning reel, that line is going on and then it's curling over. This is just rolling right on to a top, to a spool. And it's basically the line is being held on your Baitcast spool the same way it's being held on this spool of line right here. So ideally you want this line to be coming off the same way it is rolling on to this reel. And so that means that when we spool this, we want this line staying upright just like this, coming off over the top. And so to do this, you can have a friend hold this for you. There's like line spoolers that you can buy. The easiest one is to just have a friend or somebody hold like a Sharpie marker like this, and then they hold it like that, and you can reel. The other way to do it, which I'm going to show you guys, is if you don't have someone else, take a cup or some type of Tupperware, and you can actually put that spool just like this on top. I have a couple pieces of electrical tape here you can put over that pin, and then tape it on to the side of the Tupperware just like that, as you see. I'm going to do it on this side as well here. Okay, just like that. So now you can kind of hold it, it'll sit there and it'll hold on that little cup for you as you reel in. So it's very easy to do. And it's obviously very easy to take apart. And it's something that everybody probably has, already in their house. Okay, so when this is ready, I'm actually going to put this over here by my bed. The one thing you got to make sure sometimes with the mono and the fluoro is that it doesn't kind of fold over that spool like I'm having some problems with right here. This can happen a lot more with mono than any other line specifically. But we're going to put that right here on our bed. Okay, now this next step on actually reeling it in is much easier when you have a rod to hold it on. This is like basically 1/2 of a fishing rod, just because it's easier. I don't have to wave around a big tall rod in my room. You can use an ice fishing rod, that works as well. Or just the rod that you're fishing with if you have the room, right? Just something to hold that reel on. It's much easier because you do not want to just reel this on without any slack, right? You want to have this locked down. You can kind of put this in your shoulder, and you want your finger on top of that line just like that. So when you reel, you're filling it with tension. Once that tension's tight, I like to just click down my drag, and now using your finger holding that line, you can slowly reel that onto your spool just like this. You don't want your finger to be too close because you don't want it to go on uneven. That's why you really want to have it through that line guide in there so that it can evenly put all of it onto your spool. Some people like to really burn it in on this step. I like to just slow and steady, take your time, and make sure there's some pressure on your finger. Obviously not too much because you'll burn your finger doing this. That line's coming through and it gets hot. but just enough to where you're really putting a good amount of pressure onto that spool. Usually within the first couple casts you take, it kind of, you know, it'll even itself out anyway. But this is why I like to do it this step, because it does make those first couple casts a little bit easier. But yeah, definitely within, you know, 5 minutes of fishing, you'll see that it'll kind of adjust itself into place, and your cast will be a little bit better. Now, as far as spooling to the top goes, some people like to fully load their reel. I'm not a huge fan of that. I like to put it at about 80 to 90% capacity. You'll know the 80 to 90% because that spool that's in there, you'll see the little bump where the spool is. I will show you guys on this reel here what I mean. I like to have it almost to the top, but about 80 to 90%. I think I get a little bit better cast doing that. So we're going to cut our line here now, right up on the top. And we are now done. Our reel is spooled. If you want to tie a little bait or something on here so that you don't have to you know, worry about it in here or whatever, you can. Another thing you can do as well is you can just tie like a big loop up here, just like that, a big old loop, and then you can just actually put it behind the reel or onto like one of the handles right here. So you can just take it like that and go like that onto the handle. That way when you go out to fish or whatever and you've got to rig up, you're not trying to pick it through the eye and all that. All you do is just open the clicker up, boom, you're ready to go. It's very simple. Okay, so in terms of the spool, if you guys can see there what I mean by it being filled up to about 80 or 90%, as you can tell, there's just a little bit of room where that black spool is right there. There's just a little bit of room right above it, you know, about 10% of the spool's room. Some people, like I said, they like to fill it up completely to the top. I don't like that. 80 to 90% is what works the best for me. So let's talk about tuning your reel and the best way to do that. So the first thing we're going to talk about here are your brakes. Now, your brakes are usually on the bottom of your reel right here. Some reels will have your brakes right on the side as like a little dial, and both of those work just as good. The brakes are what you use to basically slow down your spool at the very end of the cast. So if you're backlashing a lot at the very end of your cast, it's most likely because your brakes are not set tight enough. Typically, most reel companies will go 1 through 10. Shimano will go 1 through 4. So I've got a bunch different here that I can click down like this. I typically have this around a 2 to 3 for me, but you can set this to max brakes if you want. Most reels, baitcast reels that have the dial knob on the side, it'll go a 1 through all the way to max. And you can set that completely to max if you want the least amount of chances for a backlash, do that. But I will say it's gonna not give you as far of a cast as you may want. But if you're just getting into baitcasters, always set that to max. If you've been fishing them for a while, you know, maybe mess around at 8 or 9 and kind of see what you can do from there. Typically, I'm a 2 or a 3 on a Shimano. Occasionally, I go to a 4. Now, the next part we're going to talk about here is your spool tension knob. So the spool tension knob is always going to be on the side that you reel. So for instance, for me, right, this is a left-hand retrieve. It's on my left side. If you were a right-hand retrieve, it's going to be on your right side. So your spool tension knob is what basically controls the beginning and middle of your cast. So if you're taking a cast and the second you cast, it immediately backlashes, the reason why is because your spool tension knob is not tight enough, right? So the best way for me that I like to set this is you have your bait rigged up, ready to go. You want to tighten this as far down as you can, and then you're gonna click open your spool release button right here at the bottom. So you're gonna click that open, just like that, and just, obviously your bait's not gonna move, right? Because your spool tension is completely set to max. Slowly release that spool tension, slowly but surely move that and loosen it until your bait is just slowly falling down to the ground. Not a complete fast drop, but just a slow and subtle move until it hits the ground, right? As you guys are seeing right now, you're seeing the speed at which I would recommend you to do this. Once that is set, that is how you know your spool tension knob is set correctly. If you're still having a little trouble with backlashes, then tighten that up just a tad bit. and see what that does. But it's kind of messing around with those two features right there in order to get the best setting for you. Now, the last thing here is your drag, and your drag is obviously very important when you're fighting a fish. The drag is what is determining how much pressure can be put, right, until that spool starts moving. And that is only when this is clicked up. So when your spool release is down, it's not working. That's your spool tension knob and your brakes. But when this is clicked over, now your drag is the one that is adjusting how that moves. So you want to adjust your drag accordingly. Obviously, I mean, I adjust it when in the middle of fighting a fish, right? But you want to just basically have, you know, if you can kind of pull on it a little bit and it's moving to, you know, needs to be a little tighter, right? You want to be kind of struggling to pull that line out just a little bit, and then it's going. As you guys are probably seeing the visual right now of what I have it set to. But like I said, it all depends on what style of fishing you're doing. If you're using something where you need a little more drag, or you need to be full locked down brakes ready to go. If you're using like a 50-pound braided line, you don't need any drag. I mean, that thing is going to be that braid is going to be so strong, nothing is going to break, right? You don't have to worry about drag at that point. You want to horse that fish in. You're most likely fishing heavy cover or something of that. But for instance, on my rig here, I've got 10-pound test, right? So I do not want to be locked down drag, especially if I hook a big old smallmouth or something, right? I want to have drag. I want to be able to play that fish and let him run. And a lot of that is kind of just an experience on the water, learning. You may lose a fish or two, but that's how you're gonna learn, right, how to set that drag. If you guys enjoyed this video, I've got 2 more up here that I think you're also really gonna like. Consider subscribing. It really does help me out. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. We'll see you guys next time on Humbug Videos.